Welcome to the Nerdstalgic podcast with your host, the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm.
Howdy beans, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the Nerdstalgic podcast with me, your host, Luke the Human. Hope you're doing well, hope you're all good, as per usual. Today is going to be another fun one, as all my episodes are, or I'd like to think all my episodes are fun. But we're going back to remembering Blue Sky Studios, one of my favourite studios that never really got a chance to shine bright. They just kind of came and went like a dream. And I miss them deeply. But before I get into that, before I reintroduce that series, one thing I do want to say is that make sure that you follow me on Twitter at Nerdstalgic_pod to be updated on everything and anything that I'm doing, reading, watching, gaming, playing, all that jazz. Follow me on Twitter at Nerdstalgic_pod for a update there. Also, if you listen to this on YouTube, thank you very, very much. But also make sure that you subscribe if you haven't already. Like, comment, share, all that jazz. It helps me immensely. As of recording this, I think I'm currently at 85 subscribers. So I'm slowly getting there. I'm slowly growing. It takes time, but things are going really, really well on YouTube at the moment. So if you are listening on YouTube, make sure you subscribe if you haven't yet, because I'll greatly appreciate it. Okay then, so a reintroduction to Blue Sky Studios. So the simple premise is this. I've been doing this since season 1. I'm now in season 2, and it's kind of my goal with this series is to look back on Blue Sky Studios, which was a studio that, in my opinion, was underrated. That, you know, they were mostly known just for Ice Age, but they made many good, fantastic movies that not many people sort of talk about nowadays. Everybody talks about DreamWorks, everybody talks about Disney and Pixar and Studio Ghibli, and even to go far like Sony Animation and Illumination Studios and all these different animated studios that are out now. Everybody talks about them, but not many people actually talk about Blue Sky. Blue Sky's been around since the 90s. It wasn't until like the early 2000s with Ice Age that they actually got their big break and they managed to grow as big as they were. But only people know them for Ice Age. So now that they're no longer a studio, now that they've kind of been sucked in by Disney and kind of subsidized and spread out into the other studios that Disney owns, I just wanted to look back and remember how good of the studio this was. You know, I have looked back on Ice Age 1 and 2. I've also looked at Robots. A couple of weeks ago, I did Horton Hears a Who, which went really, really well. People really seemed to like that episode. Like, I'm not surprised. It's Horton Hears a Who. Everybody loves Dr. Seuss and Horton. So I'm partly not surprised, but I also am because I kind of thought not many people would want to listen to it. But a lot of people did. So if you're one of those people, thank you. It's like it's growing so quickly on YouTube, by the way, and the amount of views and comments that it's getting it's unbelievable. But coming back to it today, I've decided that I want to go back to this series. I didn't want to leave it too long because I really wanted. I'm really looking forward to watching this movie because today we're going to be looking at Ice Age 3: Dawn of the Dinosaurs. To be honest, if you've been listening since day one, when I first spoke with Ice Age, I'm still one of these people that feels like Ice Age 1 was cut and dry, perfect. You know, it did what it needed to do. It didn't need a sequel. You know, yes, I would have. Part of me would have been interested to see what these characters got up to more, but I feel like as a movie, as a story, Ice Age, the original film, from start to finish, tells a complete story and kind of leaves it up for sort of interpretation of what happens next. I've leaves it up for, like, if you want them to live happily ever after, you can. If you want them to kind of go on life and then decide to part ways, you can. So you're free to believe and feel whatever you want to happen next. You know, your imagination is you're only sort of limited by your imagination. But of course, money and all and that sort of things, you know, breeds success, which breeds sequels. And they decided to do Ice Age 2: The Meltdown. Now, if you listen to my review of that, you know that I was a bit sort of and ahhing about it. Like, it's not a bad movie. I just feel like it wasn't needed. Like, they could have done something else. Like, Robots was fantastic. After Ice Age, they did Robots. And I love Robots. And I feel like Robots is an underrated movie, as it is, because not many people talk about it. and people really overlook it, which I don't. Again, I don't understand why, because it has a beautiful message and a beautiful story behind it. Um, but again, like I said, money brings sequels, so they made Ice Age 2. I'm not a big fan of it, but I watched it, reviewed it. It did really, really well. People seem to like it, and it's been months actually. I think before I've actually spoke about Ice Age, so it'd be fun to come back to it. As for this movie, for my memories of it, I remember enjoying it when it came out, mainly because well, I'm a big kid. Anybody who knows me will tell you that I am a big kid, and knows that I loved anything to do with dinosaurs. So they already had pulled me in with dinosaurs. Okay, the idea that you've got my favorite sort of group of characters going to another world full of dinosaurs. I'm already sold. And I remember watching it, and even though that I was on the side, and again I still am as an adult, but as a kid I was a lot more lenient, where I was like, okay, fair enough. I love animated movies. I'm more willing, okay, to see a sequel or a third movie, shall we say? Because again, I was let down a bit with Ice Age: The Meltdown. It felt a bit too sort of linear. It felt too sort of stuck in a bowl, which again the movie is. They're in a giant sort of clearing that's just surrounded on all sides by ice. So they are stuck in this sort of linear sort of story of like go from point A to point B, and then the story kind of evolves in the middle of that. So I was kind of a bit bored of this linear sort of small area. So I thought, like, if there was to make a sequel, that I want to be more grand, that I'd want to be bigger and more bold and ambitious. And Ice Age 3 is bigger, more bold and ambitious. And now, as an adult, again, I haven't seen this movie in a while, if I'm being honest. So it's going to be fun to rewatching it after I finish the introduction, because as I do with all my reviews, I don't watch the movie. When I do the introduction, because I used to do it, then I found that it kind of I would let go how I felt in the introduction, so that it would leave in a way no point to really sit down and listen to the review, because I'd already told you how I felt in the introduction. So I feel like if I don't watch the movie or play the game before I do the introduction, then that leaves me free to talk from memory and how I feel at the time. And then when it gets around to actually review, that's new feelings, new emotions, new memories, and sort of new sort of things. And gives you again a reason to actually sit down and want to listen to me talk about what it is I'm talking about. Um, but from what I remember, I even though I wanted it, even this movie was more grander and more sort of more of what I wanted really. Part of me still feels, and again as an adult, it still feels like the beginning of this movie, from what I remember, just feels like it could have been sort of straight to DVD. It doesn't feel like the beginning of it before they go underground and you meet Buck and you meet all the other sort of dinosaurs. The beginning of it just feels kind of like a short film, like Sid's up to no like Ellie's now pregnant. Manny is now dealing with her being pregnant. He's being very sort of overprotective because he hasn't had a family, because his family were died and killed by humans in the first movie. So again, he's now got a chance to not just to be a dad again, but also he's really protective over his family because he doesn't want them to sort of have the same fate. Because the first Ice Age movie is really dark, and again, as sequels do, and they kind of change things and move direction. They go from being a very dark sort of movie to being more light-hearted. And all animated movies sort of do this. You probably find like the first movie might have been very dark and very sort of had tones of very sort of adult sort of themes. And then as they get more popularity and kids watch them and they want to monetize them and sell toys and that sort of thing, they tend to go a little more light-hearted, which is fine. That's just the production and that's just the way of things. But in terms of this, this watching sort of Manny being overprotective and Sid getting jealous, and then Sid being like, well, I want a family, so he gets these rocks. Well, he thinks they're rocks, they're eggs. And he sort of he turns them into his little family, and then DA goes like, I don't know if I want to be part of a family anymore because I'm not really a hunter. I feel my predator instinct starting to subside and go as I'm getting a bit more placid. These story bits, okay, they're interesting, but they just like they feel like they'd be interesting, like especially the Diego sort of storyline that'd be interesting on its own. So it just feels like from what I remember, the introduction of this movie as it begins just feels like a cut to sort of short film, like a short film idea, and then it's not until they go underground that it gets more grander, more sort of see, now this is what I'm looking for. So from what I remember, the beginning I didn't really like, and I remember sort of being like, okay, I can't wait for the beginning to kind of be done with, so that we can get to the more interesting stuff, which is the dinosaurs, which when it does, it's interesting. But those are my real memories of this movie, was that I enjoyed it for the dinosaurs, but I don't really remember enjoying the beginning so much. So it'll be interesting now, because again, I haven't seen this movie in years, so it'll be interesting to, when I go back to rewatch it, seeing it with more adult eyes, a more sort of adult brain. Yes, I don't have kids, but a lot of people that I went to school with now have kids, and sort of that sort of mentality of now having a more mature sort of, soon to be, could be, potentially be a fatherly sort of mind when I eventually do have kids. It'd be interesting to see how I feel about that storyline now. It'd be interesting to how I feel about the introduction. So I'm excited, not just for to see dinosaurs and to see Buck again, because I love Buck. Buck was an incredible sort of addition to these roster of characters, but also just to see, I don't know, to kind of see how my maturity has changed, as you know, watching these movies, how these movies have changed, how these characters have changed, how I have changed as well. And that's kind of what I found with the first two films, as well as Robots, my sort of interpretation of them, how it's changed over the years and how I've grown. So I'm looking forward to that side of things. All right. As for sort of the production, this movie came out on the 1st of July 2009. The plot is Ellie is now pregnant, which now is making Manny excited to be a father again, but overprotective and anxious. Meanwhile, Diego is contemplating leaving the herd, as he feels that he's losing his edge as a hunter and isn't meant for the family life. Sid begins to wish for a family of his own and adopts 3 lost eggs that he found in a cave. Manny tells Sid to put the eggs back, but Sid ignores him and looks after them anyway, which eventually hatch into baby Tyrannosauruses, who Sid thinks, who they think Sid to be their mother, and follow him everywhere. Meanwhile, Scrap becomes infatuated with a flying saber-toothed squirrel named Scaretta, though she only wants his acorn. Although Sid tries his best to raise the dinosaurs, this their rambunctious behavior scares away all the younger animals, and they destroy the playground Manny built for his child. Angering Manny, as Manny is in the midst of scolding Sid, the mother of the Tyrannosaurus eggs, who Sid stole, now returns. When Sid refuses to return the babies to the mother, she carries both Sid and her children underground. With Diego in pursuit, Manny, Ellie, Crash, and Eddie follow as well, and discover that this icy cave leads to a vast subterranean jungle populated by dinosaurs, thought to be extinct. They're attacked by a group of carnivorous dinosaurs and saved by a deranged, one-eyed weasel named Buck. So that's sort of the premise of this movie. And like I mentioned, the first sort of beginning of it, it just feels like a cut to sort of DVD sort of film, kind of like Lion King 2, you know, that sort of film. Like, it's not a bad story, but you could tell like it's straight to DVD. Hunchback of Notre Dame 2, that's actually a pretty fantastic film, but that went straight to DVD. Like a lot of these sort of Disney, Pixar, DreamWorks, they all sort of did these sort of straight to DVD stories that like weren't really putting a lot of thought into the story and production. It was just sort of, we want to sort of tell another story, but you know, we don't have much faith in it. We don't have much faith in the story, so we're just going to put it on DVD or video and get it out. You don't see much of it happen nowadays. It was something that happened a lot when I was younger, and before I was born. But that's what it feels like to me now as an adult, and kind of felt to me when I was younger, was like it just doesn't feel as strong. Like I'm not really that interested in Ellie being pregnant. Again, I was young. You know, I was promised dinosaurs, and I was hoping for dinosaurs straight away, and you don't get the dinosaurs straight away. So me being young and immature was like, I don't really care about this. You know, so again, it adds to the fact of my interest as to why I'm so excited to sort of rewatch this movie, just to see how my brain has changed and how my maturity has changed, and to see if I kind of connect more to this, and actually see if I could enjoy this movie in its entirety, not just in its sort of half, more than I enjoy Ice Age 2. because at the moment Ice Age 1 is still the pinnacle. Nothing's overthrown Ice Age 1 yet. In terms of the Ice Age series, nothing has beat the first movie. So it'll be interesting to see if this movie overthrows it or not. As for the production, Blue Sky decided to do a more of a what-if adventure in the third Ice Age installment, like finding the giant ape in King Kong, or in the middle, and then get my words out. I do apologise. Bit tongue-tied because I'm quite excited. Let me start again. Blue Skies decided to do more of a what-if adventure in the third Ice Age installment, and added the dinosaurs to the story. Character designer Pete DeSeville welcomed the new plot addition since he could not think of any other giant mammal to put into the story. The Lost World approach led to the colourful dinosaurs because the dinosaurs didn't have to be just brown, and you could take liberties because no one knows what colour they were. According to Seville, Rudy's design was inspired by the Bronchos. Oh god, this is the big dinosaur, non-dyslexic friendly word. Baryonyx, I think. Baryonyx, however you pronounce that, because of his crocodile-like look, which de Seville considered even more menacing than the T-Rex. Ice Age Dawn of the Dinosaurs held special screenings on Father's Day, June the 21st, 2009, in 330 theatres across the United States, exclusively in 3D. That day was chosen due to the film featuring a theme of fatherhood. Widely, it was released on July the 1st, 2009. It was also the first 3D movie that Blue Skies did. As for the box office, the film earned $196.6 million in North America and $690.1 million in all other territories, for a worldwide total of $886.7 million against a budget of $90 million. So it monumentally broke even and was close to hitting the $1 billion mark and joining the $1 billion club. It is the third highest grossing film of 2009, the highest grossing animated film of 2009, the highest grossing Ice Age film, the 14th highest grossing animated film of all time. Well, I don't know if that still is. I'll actually have to check that one, actually. So you have... Where's Ice Age? So actually, Ice Age Dawn of the Dinosaurs is actually 17th now. It's not 14th anymore. 14th now is Minions: The Rise of Gru. So... That's how it works. So from 1 to where Ice Age... So Ice Age... Actually, believe it or not. So Ice Age 3 is 17th. Underneath of that is Ice Age Continental Drift. Beneath that is The Secret Life of Pets. And at number 20 is Inside Out, which is... Well, it made a lot of money. Inside Out was $857.6 million. Which is still a lot of money, but bloody, I thought that would have been a lot higher. At number 1, you've got The Lion King. Number 2, Frozen 2. Frozen 3 at number... Frozen 1 at number 3. The Super Mario movie is at number 4. The Incredibles 2 is at number 5. Minions are at number 6. Ice Age 4 is at number 7. Toy Story 4 is at number 7. Toy Story 3 is at number 8. We're still at the $1 billion, by the way. We're still talking the billions at this point. Number 9 is Despicable Me 3. Finding Dory is number 10. Zootopia is at number 11. And it's not until we get to number 12, the 12th highest ranking animated movie, do we actually get under the billion at $970 million with Despicable Me 3. And it's actually I've just had a look. At number 1, it isn't the original Lion King. It's the remake, the live-action remake, which I didn't really much like. But that is actually sitting at the sort of number 1 of the most sort of high-grossing animated movie of all time, which feels a bit sacrilege because it's a remake, and really the original Lion King should be the $1 billion movie, but it isn't. Going back anyway, so at the time it was the 14th highest grossing animated film of all time. It is also the highest grossing animated film of 2009 worldwide. Ice Age Dawn of the Dinosaurs also surpassed Finding Nemo to have the highest international gross for an animated film. The film grossed $218.4 million during the opening weekend and was the highest grossing opening for an animated film at the time. it would hold that record for less than a decade until it was surpassed by Incredibles 2 in 2018. So it held the record for a long time till The Incredibles took it, and obviously The Incredibles made over $1 billion. The film was nominated in 2 categories at the 8th Visual Effects Society Awards for Outstanding Animation in an Animated Feature Motion Picture and Outstanding Animated Character in an Animated Feature Motion Picture. There's even a 4D experience, which I've never done a 4D movie experience. If anybody has, it'd have to let me know. Critical response. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film has a approval rating of 46% based on 165 reviews and an average rating of a 5.4 out of 10. The site's critical consensus reads, Ice Age Dawn of the Dinosaurs boasts some excellent animation. In particular, the dinosaurs are wonderfully realized, but its story is tired and monotonous. On Metacritic, the film has a score of 50 out of 100 based on 25 critics, indicating mixed or average reviews. Audience polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of an A minus on an A plus to F scale. Robert Ebert gave the film 3.5 stars out of 4, claiming that Ice Age Dawn of the Dinosaurs is the best of the 3 films about our friends in the inner species herd of plucky prehistoric heroes, and it involves some of the best use of 3D I've seen in an animated feature. Keith Phillips of the AV Club graded the film a C+, claiming the sequel throws its commitment to the era away, with movie number 3 a ploy sure to anger Ice Age purists everywhere. And Carrie Rickety of the Philadelphia Inquirer enjoyed the film's animation art in Zeus's imaginative but panned the flatness of the story and indifferent voice work of all the obvious. So the movie did really, really well in terms of box office and money, and again, it makes sense when you actually look at this film. It made as much money as it did. It almost reached the $1 billion mark. It was the 14th highest grossing animated film of all time, and it held that spot for a very, very long time. But also the fact of it made so much money that, of course, it was going to have sequels. Of course, they were going to milk this franchise, and they did. With I think it was 2, maybe 3 extra films after this. They really did milk it. Again, much to my demise, because again, I wouldn't say I'm an Ice Age purist, but it started to get silly. I always say this in every Ice Age review I do. I always mention that after Ice Age 1, they go really, really silly. But again, they're just following the money. The money leads them in this direction, and it just got the fact of it, instead of thinking about what the story should be and what we should really focus on what we did before, or making sort of new stories, because these films make so much money, they're going to keep making more out of them. They're going to bleed them dry. Shrek, I love Shrek, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying all the Shrek movies are bad. I love Shrek 1 to 4. But you can tell, because how much money Shrek was making, they kept making the Shrek films, and eventually, luckily, they stopped with Shrek Forever After, which I'm not saying that's a bad film. I still quite enjoy it. I went to cinemas to see it, and I love it. But even so, if something is successful as it is and makes as much money as it is, and it keeps making money, and you can monetize it, you can make toys out of it, and you can advertise it to everybody, anybody, especially families, they're going to keep doing it, and they did. And I look forward to talking about those films when I get around to it, because it's going to be fun to just talk about how silly they are and how silly they got. But that is sort of the production of Ice Age 3. I do apologise for stuttering and getting lost there, mainly because I'm excited. And I'm not very good at reading out loud because of my dyslexia. So, I do apologise. But you beans, you've been with me from day one. It's part of the course. I tend to keep a lot of my mistakes in, mainly because I just like to be very unique and very honest. I don't like taking a lot of the ums out. I take as many as I can, but I tend to leave a lot in just to kind of make it a bit more sort of nuanced, because I like my podcast to be a discussion. I like it to be a conversation between friends. It's not meant to be professional. It's meant to be fun. It's meant to be interesting. It's meant to be different. It's meant to be weird, wild, loosey-goosey, wonderful. So if I do make mistakes, I will apologise, but that's just the way I am. I'm dyslexic and I am sort of sporadic, but I always try to come back to the point and try to make it somewhat fun. So that's the introduction. I'm going to go off now and watch the movie. I'm quite looking forward to this. I'm quite excited. Hopefully, my thoughts and feelings change. We will see. I'm going to have to wait for that, but you lucky beans get to see it right now. So, without further ado, on to Ice Age 3: Dawn of the Dinosaurs movie review. Right, so basically, where to start with this film? Um, First of all, it's not bad, right? Um, but it's not perfect at the same time. And I think for me, what lets it down after just finishing it is simply the beginning. Everything else is great, but it comes too late. It feels like the beginning is so slow that by the time it starts getting fun and the action starts happening, that it's like in quick succession. It's like watching a sketch comedy show. You know what I mean? It's just scene after scene after scene of just amazing, amazing, amazing. But again, because how slow the beginning was, it just feels like by the time you finally get to those amazing scenes of funny jokes and Buck being Buck and just funny little things and dinosaurs, that by the time you get to that and that happens, the movie ends. And then once the sort of like Ellie finally has the baby, it cuts to another like sort of comedic sort of scene with Scrat and his missus or his new girlfriend, Scratetta. And then you have this funny little joke about him and getting his acorn, and then it goes back to them sort of leaving, surviving, Buck taking down Rudy and all that. And then back to Scrat, bit of a comic relief, and then it ends. And it just feels like if that beginning was shortened, this probably would have been a bit better. But I know I've just condensed this movie. Like that's not my review. I know I've just condensed it, but like that's my sort of initial feelings. Like if I was to watch this in the cinema, freshly coming out of the cinema, watching this movie, that's kind of how I feel. It's like I was right about the beginning. The first 30 minutes are slow. You know, which is it's great for sort of character building and for Manny and Diego, but slow for story. Because in the introduction you learn that sort of Ellie is now pregnant and that Manny is a anxious wreck, which makes sense for who he is as a character, as I broke down quite deeply in my first sort of Ice Age review. Um, Manny's kind of gone through the ringer for these three movies. In the first movie, he is a stone cold Grinch. He doesn't like anybody. He doesn't want to be around anybody. He hates people, like humans, shall we say, as well as other animals. He's a loner. He's a lone wanderer, and for good reason. Because of his past and what happened to his family. I don't blame him. But by the end of the first movie, he learns the differences between us are not so different, and he's the bigger person, shall we say? He's bigger than the humans. To put his differences aside, like despite what the humans did to his family, like they killed them, murdered them, slaughtered them, most likely ate them and skinned them. Um, he managed to put all that aside to save one of them and to kind of at the end when like the hunter's got the arrow up to him, it's like I'm going to spear you in the face. He pushes it out the way, peace and love, and says, "No, I'm not about that. I've got your child. I'm giving you back. I forgive you. Goodbye." And again, this is why I say the first Ice Age movie is fantastic. I know I might have gone a bit too deep in that review, but the point is, Manny's character development all makes sense there. And then you have Ice Age 2. Despite me not liking it so much, I will say that it does well for Manny, how when he meets Ellie and he realizes like he's no longer the last one, that there's a chance for him to sort of meet somebody of his own kind and potentially have a new life. Even though that I said in that review that I don't feel like Manny would move on as quick as he did. But then again, like it's never implied how many years have passed since against his kids dying, since we met in Ice Age 1 and the events of Ice Age 2. It never really determined how many years have passed since then. Again, it doesn't need to be. It's a kids' movie. But still, I just didn't feel that Manny would fall in love that quick. But the point is, first movie loses family, gains new family, gains new respect, character development. It works. Second film, he's now got his family. Now meets somebody who's part of his kind. He thought he was the last of his kind because again, he'd only known his other family that had sadly been killed. So in his mind, he was the only one. And then finally, meets her, falls in love, they get together. In this movie, they finally have a child together. She's pregnant. All character development, it makes sense, and it would make sense as why he's so sort of anxious and so protective of not just Ellie, but also protective of their newborn, well, not newborn baby yet, but their sort of pregnant wife, is because he's gone through the ring of losing his family. So it all makes sense for his sort of character development, and I like that. That's fine. That's not a bad part of this slow beginning. That all makes sense. That's all fine. And then you have Diego, who's also dealing with like a midlife crisis, shall we say, where like now he's been so sort of placid within sort of his new herd. He's not feeling like a hunter anymore. He's not feeling like a predator anymore. He just feels like he's not needed, that he should go off on his own. It's time for him to lead the herd. Like Manny's now starting up a new family. He no longer needs the bodyguard or protector, sort of the best friend as it is anymore. I'm going to go do my own life and leave. And obviously, Manny feels betrayed by this because sort of Manny needs Diego as much as Diego needs Manny. It's like Sid is the glue. Sid them all brought them all together. But it is very much, it is still sort of Manny and Diego are sort of the best friends, and Sid is kind of like the silly sort of other friend. But also they love him just as equally. But you know that if there's ever a moment that Manny needed somebody who he could rely on, he would go to Diego first because they're like best friends, best buds, right? And obviously Diego tells Manny that I want to go. Manny obviously he feels betrayed. He even makes a comment of like, this is why guys don't talk to each other about things because it just ends in arguments or ends in sort of disagreements or very childish disputes. Not all the time, but sometimes. Um, so that works. It makes sense how Diego would feel like he's not needed anymore. He'd want to leave, and Manny sort of got new family, anxious. All that's fine. What slows it down is Sid. And don't get me wrong, I love Sid, but Sid. What I didn't realize this when I first watched this when I was younger, and the multiple viewings. It's only now rewatching it with a viewer's perspective and a viewer's mind. Was that they use Sid as plot armor. They use him as a plot development, as a plot point. They have Sid who basically is like, well, I want a family and I'll never meet anybody. So he basically goes off on his own, sad, trying to make friends. He finds these eggs in a cave, adopts them, and that is basically the MacGuffin. Sort of the Deus Machina, the sort of reason to keep the plot going. He finds the eggs hatch, they happen to be dinosaurs. Sid doesn't care, Sid loves them because, Sid. Next thing you know, Mama T-Rex comes, takes them back, takes Sid with her, and with the babies as well. Takes them to Dino World, and then the adventure starts to begin, really. But it's that part with Sid that, yeah, it's funny, and I guess for little kids it's great, but like it slows everything down. It felt like that moment with Sid and the kids. It felt like a short sort of comedy sketch. A short. Whenever you get like Disney does them, where they do the short movies. They did it with Cars. Like I think they were called. Mater. There was always to do with Mater. Mater went on these different weird adventures, and there was little short, sort of like 2 to 3 minutes, sort of short animated movies. It felt like that. It felt like a short animated film. It didn't feel like it fit, but because they made the kids into dinosaurs, obviously it made a bit more sense. But it just too prolonged. It was just too long a segment. If that segment was shortened, or even it was just the fact of, they found a different way to bring the dinosaurs in, it would have been a bit more sort of, shall we say, interesting, and you could have got to the dinosaurs a lot quicker, potentially. But I find that once you get over the fact of the plot armor and the introduction to the dinos, when we finally get past those first 30 minutes, that's when it starts to speed up, and that's when it starts to get more interesting. And you meet Buck and you meet all the other dinosaurs, and you find this big, colorful world that's no longer just ice. There's more to it. It's fascinating. It's interesting, and I love the whole sort of Lost World meets sort of inner Earth, sort of dinosaurs living underneath us and all that. I love that idea. I love those theories and concepts as it is in the natural, real world. So I love reading stories about them and seeing them sort of in popular culture and that sort of thing. So the whole inner Earth, dinosaurs underground, tropical paradise, I love it. Proper Jules Verne. So that all sort of works, but it's just a shame it takes the first 30 minutes to actually get to that point. as for the animation, it's impressive. You can really see how they have managed to, how much they've improved, how far they've come for their animation. Like I've always said it, robots for me, up until this point, is the pinnacle of their animation, mainly because, and I've mentioned this before, is when you try, there's a difference between trying to animate. Again, I only did a bit of animation in college and a little bit in university, but from what I learned, it was easier basically to do shading and textures on something that's not organic, something that's not meant to be fleshy, something that's not meant to be realistic or real, like metallic and metal and that sort of thing. It's easier to do textures on them to make them look good than it is if something to look more lifelike, more fleshy, hairy monsters, animals, creatures, anything that was like a humanoidish or some sort of bipedal animal. Then that's when you're getting a bit more difficult when in terms of animation. But something that's like a toy or plasticky, it's a bit easier to do. And that's why robots looks as good as it does. That's why robots still looks fantastic today, because it is very sort of very simple and basic and non-fleshy. It's bioorganic instead of organic. You know what I mean? It's more mechanical. And you can tell that over the years of like Horton Is Who and the Ice Age movies, as well as everything they've learned from robots, up until this movie, everything else looks a bit more crisper. You can see a lot more detail on Manny, on his fur, on Sid and Diego, how they all look a lot more furry. The creatures are a lot more detailed. The dinosaurs are more scaly, and there's a lot more sort of colourful to them, colourfulness and the way they look and the whole world, and you can just see that how far they've come in their animation. And I really love to see stuff like that. I love to see the evolution of progression of things in book stories and animation and games and all that. I love the evolution of the growth, to actually see the people behind it have actually learned from what came before and they are trying their best to improve it. I love seeing stuff like that, so I have to commend them for that. Where did I get to on my notes? Da, 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 da. Oh, here we go. Don't clamp on me. There we go. The best thing, in my opinion, that this movie did, or does, shall we say, aside from adding the dinosaurs, because anytime you add dinosaurs, pirates, or puppies, or kittens, the movie's instantly a 10 out of 10, right? You add any of those things, you're winning, okay? This movie might not be a 10 out of 10, but you're still winning because you added dinosaurs, right? But aside from adding dinosaurs, one of the best things this movie did was adding the character of Buck, and then to kind of add fuel to the fire to improve that character even more, they voice cast Simon Pegg. And Simon Pegg is incredible. He's a legend. He's fantastic. I love him. I've been watching him since Spaced. I'm a big fan of Simon Pegg. And to get this character who is weird, wonderful, insane. One of my favorite quotes when Manny goes to him, he goes, how long exactly did you lose your mind? And he was like, about 6 months ago. I woke one morning dressed married to a pineapple, and an ugly pineapple, but I loved her. I'm paraphrasing a bit, but that's one of one of his quotes. I love Buck. He's one of my favorite sort of additions, and I think he appears in the next movie or the last film. One of those. He appears through eventually. But I love Buck. I love the character of him. It's so weird and wonderful. It's a great addition. And it makes sense. You're going to go to this dinosaur world that Manny and Ellie and the herd, they're tiny. Manny is the biggest thing on Earth up until this point in the Ice Age, right? He's never had to worry about anybody being scared of anything. Maybe, the saber-toothed tigers, yes, and humans, but he is the biggest thing. There's nothing to really who beats him, really. Like even the sort of saber-tooths have to kind of gang up on him, and even the humans. But he could take one of them on one-to-one very easily. So when you put Manny, who again he's used to being one of the big things on Earth, one of the biggest things, and then you put him in an environment where there are dinosaurs that are bigger than him, meaner, scarier, more deadlier, and as well with the rest of the herd, it kind of adds that dynamic of like, yeah, these guys ain't going to survive down here. You've basically a fish out of water story. And then you add in Buck, who is again a small, tiny weasel, but he's like Rambo, but he's insane. He's crazy, he's mental. He's been trapped down there for years, not had anybody to talk to. He's slowly lost his mind, but that just makes him more wonderful and interesting in terms of character. and he has this whole backstory between him and Rudy. Um, Incredible. He's insane. One of my favorite parts is when they go to the pit of despair, and it's like laughing gas, but they die laughing, and it's just it makes me laugh this scene, like how they all start to be like they're on helium, and they're just making jokes, and it's silly, and then Buck comes in, he goes, "Aren't you crazy? We're all gonna die," and they're just laughing at him, and then he starts laughing, and it's just great, fantastic. I love it. I really do. I just love this character. So it's one of the best additions that they did to this story was to add Buck in because he really sort of drives the plot and he drives the comedy. Again, you still have the moments with Sid, with the family and with the eggs. Well, not the eggs, the kids that have now slowly starting to grow up and learn, and Sid's trying to raise them one way and the mother T-Rex is trying to raise them the other, and you can tell in her face, even though she doesn't say anything, you can tell in her face that she's getting really pissed off and annoyed at Sid, and Sid's trying his best to be like, no, these are my kids, we're going to co-parent, and it's kind of funny. And I guess you still could have done that, you still could have kept that in if they still wanted to do the whole sort of Sid finds the eggs. But I just feel like that I really can't get over how the beginning could be shortened so much if you just got rid of certain parts. That if you just shortened bits, and that way we could have had more fun with the dinosaurs. We could have had more fun with the comedic sides. You could have more fun with Scrat and Scratella finding, fighting over this acorn. You could have done more of what was good and less of what was slower and not as good. You know what I mean? Um, but this movie, to me, the film feels like a good end for the characters and the story. For example, Manny finally gets a chance at being a dad again. So as I mentioned, after finally, after losing his kids in the first movie and getting a somewhat surrogate family within Diego and Sid, it being not really, it's been enough but not being enough, but it was good enough for what it was, and he was happy with it, and being able to be himself again, and then to finally meet Ellie, to realize that his life isn't over and that he has a chance of starting again and starting a family again, and that's in the end, that's kind of what he wanted, was another family, to kind of a chance of redemption, to protect the family that he lost, and he never replaced them, but to kind of prove to himself in a way that he could do that again. So he finally has the family he wants, and he finally gets a chance to be dad again. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. Like I can't really relate, and there's not much I can speak to it because, again, I don't have kids. I don't have a partner, so like I can't relate to how it must feel. But I would say it's good character development. It's very beautiful. It's very well done from movie one to movie three. His character development, I would say, is done. Him and Ellie, you've done it, as well as you'd even say Eddie and Crash as well, the Ellie's sort of surrogate possum bros. They work fine. That story's done, so we don't need to go any further with that. It's wrapped up nicely. Diego, again, he learns the importance of how much he's needed to the herd, how much he means to Manny, because again, at the end of the first movie, he sort of realized his pack that he was with weren't a good bunch of people, that he didn't want to be a part of that pack anymore, and he learned who he really was and what it means to be him to be Diego. Um, and again, he was adopted by this new herd, this new family, and he went on. But again, he quickly realizes through the second movie and this movie that, I'm not really needed. I'm not needed here. Manny's got Ellie, Sid, but again, Sid's got Manny. I'm no longer sort of the person that I was when you first met me. Um, and he was like, well, I want to go and find myself. And within doing so, he ends up getting wrapped up again in the whole sort of events of the story. He realizes that he is needed, that they do want him, they do love him, and that he actually does have a place in the herd. And again, it wraps up nicely. He realizes that he made the right choice originally, and that he is where he needs to be. He's where he belongs. And so again, wrapped up nicely. So that's two story beats, two main characters from the main herd that are wrapped up nicely. And thirdly, Sid is just Sid, but he gets a bigger family, which is what he always wanted. Because again, first movie, Sid gets you first meet Sid by being abandoned by his family. He's looking for his family. He's like, why? Doesn't anybody love me? Does nobody care about Sid the Sloth? They do this every year, you know. So we already get the character development. Like, he's always been neglected from his family. His family doesn't like him. His family doesn't love him. His family are gone. He now finds Manny, then finds Diego, has the baby. They all come together. Happy herd, happy family. Second movie, Ellie, Crash, Eddie. Um, more people to the herd, more people to the family. This is what Sid's always wanted. Yes, Sid is sort of, he's trying to find love and he's trying to, he wants to be a dad and have his own family. But by the end of this movie, he realizes, actually, I've got all the family I need and more. Now we've got the new baby. All I ever wanted was just to have a big family again. And he's got it. So, yeah, Sid might be Sid, but he got what he wanted originally, which was a family. So that's three characters, three main characters from the main herd. Sid, Manny, Diego, they all got what they wanted, all got what they needed. There's no need to carry on this story. As I said with the first Ice Age, the first Ice Age works perfectly because it leaves it open-ended, but it leaves it to a point where everything prior to that is wrapped up nicely. So there doesn't need to be a sequel. Anyway, money, they made one. Even so, even in that movie, it was like, okay, it's wrapped up, it's fine. So they keep wrapping up the stories. The Blue Sky Studios does a fantastic job of wrapping up their stories. They don't leave anything open, so like it needs to be a sequel. It's a fact of we'll tell a great story, we'll end it, and then that means that you don't need to do, like, they will do it for money, but they don't ever have to. You know what I mean? Again, I'm sitting there thinking, where's Robots 2? Robots is a fantastic movie. Doesn't need a sequel. But would I like to see one? Yes. But do I need one? No. You know what I mean? And that's what I love about Blue Skies. They're always fantastic at wrapping up their stories so that it never leaves it open-ended where it's like you have to have a sequel, but it's done in such a way where it's left it open for your interpretations, but the story itself is done. You don't need to do another one. Even Madagascar learnt after 3 movies we don't need to do anymore. Madagascar 1 and 2 was great. Madagascar 3, not so much. Funny, silly. I like to see more of the characters. But, Most Wanted in Europe, was that needed? Them going into a circus? Not really. Because it was wrapped up nicely with them in Africa and, sort of, not Marty, Alex, he finally found his family and they got to Africa and that's where they want to be and that's where they belong because those animals do belong in Africa, Just makes sense to end the story there, but they still made a third one. Even they learned to cut it off at the third movie. And it hasn't been a Madagascar movie since. Ice Age never learned that. They ended the story here, but then they made 2 more. And I can't figure out why. And it's going to be interesting to see why. And those movies I haven't watched, those movies I've seen them, but I don't remember them. So it'd be fun to relive the weird. I just remember that there was no need for them and they were very strange. So we'll see. But even Scrat gets he gets the end of his story in a way, weirdly. Like again, movie 1, movie 2, all Scrat really does is trying to get that acorn, trying to find that acorn, trying to find a way to bury that acorn, which makes you wonder if he's trying to find it and bury it, then what's the point? If he's not going to find it and eat it. But again, that's the charm of Scrat. He's weird. It makes no sense. You don't need to explain why he does what he does. He's just Scrat. He is what he is, and that's it. And that's the comedic part of it, of him always trying to get his nut but never getting it. You know what I mean? But even he gets a good ending here, where like, he finds another sort of squirrel, a female squirrel. Thinks he falls in love with her. And in a way, he kind of does, and he moves in with her, and he realizes this isn't the life that I wanted. This isn't what I really want, and what I really want actually is the acorn. That's my true love, and that's my main goal, and that's my main quest in life is to get this acorn and do what with it, I don't know, but that's not the point. His goal in life is to find this acorn and do something with it, And even he gets that sort of realization, and it's an end. And again, if you're going to end, like, it all ends fine. Manny works fine, Diego works fine, Sid works fine, Ellie, Crash, all that. Even Buck gets a happy ending. Even Buck's like, yeah, this world should stay down here. I'm not gonna leave with you guys to the surface. I don't belong there anymore. My world is down here, and I'm gonna live free underground with Rudy, and he does. So again, third movie wasn't needed. Second movie wasn't needed. But each time they did it, they managed to end it off perfectly. But now I would say, my overall thoughts is they should have stopped here. This should have been the last Ice Age movie. Don't get me wrong. I love the Ice Age franchise. I know I nitpick and I take the piss out of them, and I'm not a big fan of the second one, and I like this one for the dinosaurs. But even so, it's not needed. But I do. I generally love these characters, and they mean a lot to me. But I just feel like this should have been it, and I would have been happy if they had just done these three movies, and they was like, you know what, we've done three of them, let's move on and do something else. But they didn't, and again, I don't blame them. They were owned by 21st Century Fox. This movie almost, only 100 million off, there, give or take thereabouts, from making a billion. They got very close to joining the $1 billion club. I can't blame 21st Century Fox being like, this is a successful franchise. There's a lot of marketing here. There's a lot of sort of stuff we can do in terms of toys and advertisements and video games and books and all that kind of stuff, merchandise. There's a lot we can do here. Why not just keep this wagon going? And they did. And I don't know how much the other two movies made. I don't know if they still made loads of money because it's a recognizable IP. Everybody knows Ice Age. Everybody knows the characters, so you don't need to do much in terms of advertisement with these characters. It's the fact of no Ice Age movie, you know. So I don't know, um, but obviously money talks at the end of the day. So overall thoughts again is the fact of, even though I know this movie has sequels, I would happily, if I didn't have to do reviews, I could happily just leave these reviews here and just be like, look, that's it in terms of Ice Age for me. This is where I draw the line because I'm happy to end it here because the characters are ended happily here in terms of their story and character development and all that jazz. I've gone through the story beats with them. I've done the whole arc of begin, middle, and end. I'd happily end it here, but obviously not. I'm a reviewer, and I'm going to go through the rest of the Blue Sky movies. I think the next one is Rio. But again, I just feel this movie ends perfectly for the characters, and the sequels weren't needed. And they should have took the money they made from this and pumped it into new IPs and new stories, or even again do robots too. Even Rio again. That's the next movie on the list. I haven't watched Rio. I never watched, but even that got a sequel, Rio 2. So again, I don't know why they never went back to robots or anything like that. But again, like I said, robots works fine on its own, doesn't need a sequel. It's powerful enough where it doesn't need any more. But again, that's probably why a lot of people don't talk about robots, because it came, it went, and only those that have ever seen it really sort of know and talk about it. Otherwise, it's not something that's talked about, and it's like kind of something that happened and then they moved on. So yeah, these three movies so far in terms of Ice Age, it's been an interesting journey, but it's been a fun one. Will I say that Ice Age 3 is better than Ice Age 2? Um, I don't know. In terms of like, dinosaurs making everything better, yes. But like I said, because the beginning is so slow, um, in terms of the sort of Sid part, shall we say, that really slows it down. That you don't get enough of the dinosaur goodness. It seems to come and go so quickly, that it's just a shame, really. So I wouldn't say, like, it's weird. I would rather watch the third film over the second one, right? But the second one is a better movie in terms of pace. It really it really does get going quite quickly. You're introduced to the characters, you're introduced to what they're doing now. Then you pretty much learn that the ice is melting and that they basically are like, okay, ice is melting, we got to go, we got to move, and it's quick, it's to the point, it's quick, it's fast. It gets going very quickly, and then you meet Ellie, and then the story goes from there. With this one, it's very much of the fact of it's very slow, and then you have really silly sort of comedic sort of side short film moment with Sid, and then you get the dinosaurs. And again for kids, I don't know. If you take kids to go watch it, or you put this on for your children, would they be sitting interested? Would they be able to be retained long enough in the story till the dinosaurs came? Or would it be the fact of the story because it takes too long to get into it? Because that's where you got to think about it. You can't think of it as an adult. You got to think of it. If I had kids and I took my kids to see this, would they be interested? Would they be invested in the story? Would they pay attention for that slow beginning? and then be still interested for when the dinosaurs come? Or would they just want to have sort of quick to the point dinosaurs? Because I would have, if it was me, I'd be like, if we're bringing dinosaurs in, and this is meant to be for kids, I want to get to dinosaurs as quick as possible. So you do the Manny thing, you do the Diego thing, and then I don't know, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but then you set something up for the dinosaurs to come back up. Maybe an earthquake happens and it opens up the ice, and then next thing you've got a T-Rex that sniffs around and realize or gets some light gets shined on a scales of a dinosaur, proper T-Rex style, and then the camera goes back, and then you've got Manny and Diego talking, and then all of a sudden they hear a noise like, what's that? They turn around, big dinosaurs come out of the ground, blah 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 blah. They're in trouble, they're in a threat, and then maybe Sid gets kidnapped, gets taken away for food or something like that, and then it's the fact of, oh, we've got to go save Sid, and then you get into it. You know what I mean? You kind of cut out that whole sort of Sid growing up with eggs scene. And again, I get it with Sid with his kids, and it's very nice, very cute. But like, you've got to think, you've got to get the ball rolling. You've got to get the story going. You've got to have pace. Don't waste time on things that are not going to be interesting to young children. Because these movies are, even though they can be enjoyed by adults, they are made for kids, and we've got to think in terms of a children. It's a children's movie. You need pacing. You need to get to the point fast. You can't dilly dally. You've got to have if you promise dinosaurs, you've got to show dinosaurs. You know what I mean? So yeah, I'd rather watch the second one in terms of pacing, in terms of fun dinosaur and Buck and all that. I love this one. So yeah, I'm just a fan of Ice Age. It's going to be interesting to watch Ice Age 4 and Ice Age 5. I think Ice Age 4 is Continental Drift, and I think Ice Age 5 is Continent. Oh no, was it? Is it? No, Continental Drift. Is that the fifth one? Or Cosmic? I don't know. Basically, it involves this. And all I know from the fifth movie, because I haven't seen it, well, I only saw bits of it, was Scrat somehow gets a spaceship and then basically turns Pangea, which is a giant landmass, and then parts all the land masses and makes England and America and Europe and Africa and Australia and all of this. So yeah, it gets weird, but I look forward to it. But for me personally, to wrap it up nicely, if I wasn't to do any more reviews on Ice Age, if I was to like end it at a point, me personally, I would end it here, because it just ends perfectly for all the characters, all the stories, and it just works fantastically. And hopefully they can go off and sort of live their lives and do what they want, and then I can move through the same. And in my mind, the characters are over. I don't have to worry about what comes next. But I'm not. I'm a reviewer, and there's more Ice Age movies, and there's more sort of Blue Sky Studios projects to look into, more other exciting ones. Again, like I said, Rio, haven't watched Rio, that comes next. So it'd be interesting to actually sort of talk about that movie and actually watch it from start to finish. So it's going to be something to look forward to. But yeah, so that's been my Ice Age 3 sort of review. I do apologize if it was a bit long-winded. It's just, yeah, I just feel like this movie wasn't needed. But, I didn't think the second one was needed, but people still liked it. Some of my most popular episodes are actually, oddly enough, the Ice Age ones and Horton Hears a Who on YouTube and on Spotify. So people really seem to enjoy these. So if you're one of those people, thank you. But I'm going to go off to the end now and end it all nicely and ask you all to follow me on all my other social platforms. So if that's something that interests you or you're interested in, follow me on to the end. If not, well, thank you very, very much for sticking with me. If you're listening on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that jazz. And if you're listening on Spotify, share it with your friends, other people that you think would like Ice Age. I'd be grateful for the love. So, on to the end we go. So here I am at the end. I do apologise if sort of that other wrapping up was a bit long. I'm always really bad at ending. Sometimes with some topics, I know perfectly how to wrap it up nicely and then get off to the ending. And some I just don't know where to stop. I just be like, I end up just repeating myself, and I have to kind of internally tell my brain of like, look, it's you've said enough. You can stop talking now, and you can sort of go to the ending. Um, so I do apologize anybody who's still here sticking around with me till the end. I do apologize for the waffle it was at the end there. I just find it hard to end sometimes, but thank you for sticking with me. But again, as I mentioned in introduction, that's just me. I'm weird and I'm wonderful and have my quirks and ways of doing this podcasting thing that I do. Um, but yeah, always struggle to end. And even now, I'm like, I know what I need to say next, but I'm just repeating myself. So I'm just going to get into it. If you want to be sort of kept up to date on everything and anything that I'm doing, you can follow me on Twitter at Nerdstalgic_pod. That's the best place to follow me because you will be updated on everything that I'm doing, basically. Also, don't forget you can find this podcast not just on Spotify, but you can find me on Anchor Music. You can find me on Anchor, or it's now called Spotify for podcasters. I think they've changed the name now. Google Podcasts, Amazon Music Podcasts. You can also find me on Audible. You can find me on TuneIn. If you can access that in your part of the world, I can't get it here in the UK, but apparently you can get TuneIn in America. So if you're in America, you can find me on there. Also, you can find me on YouTube. And if you are listening on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that jazz. It helps me immensely. And like I said, the Blue Sky Studios episodes, again, I don't know why. I'm happy for it. Like I'm not against it, obviously, but for some reason, they're the most successful episodes on YouTube. The Horton Is a Who is quite successful. It's probably at the same amount of views now, 47, 48 views. It's right next to the Ice Age 2 review. The Robots and the Ice Age 1 review were some of the most popular ones from season 1. Again, I don't understand it, but again, I feel like it's a factor because a lot of people don't talk about Blue Sky Studios and the Blue Sky Studios movies. That whenever somebody does come along and review them, it's that part of nostalgia for a lot of people, isn't it? It's that fact of, oh, I remember that movie. Hardly anybody talk about that film or that studio. I'm interested. I want to listen, and that's what I feel like it might be. It might also be me as well, but I feel like it's probably just the topic draws people in, and then they discover me and they're like, oh, this guy's interesting. um, but yeah, so if you are listening on YouTube, I do have there are other episodes available as well in this sort of Blue Sky series. But don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that jazz. It really, really helps me out immensely. Also on Spotify, don't forget to give me a star rating. 5 stars, best thing you've ever heard in your life. 1 star, not very good. You don't like Ice Age. You think I waffle too much. Whatever you feel like is fair. Please do let me know. I think I'm currently sitting at a 4.8 now on Spotify in terms of my rating, which is all right, considering that I had a 5 star, record for quite a while. I'm glad somebody came along and was just pulled me down a peg because it kind of realized, like, okay, I need to improve. I might have slipped somewhere that I've got to boost myself back up. And that's why your feedback helps because the more I hear off you beans and the more I hear what you like and what you don't like and what you want to see and don't want to see, the better that I can craft what I do and what I make to not just please you, the listener, but also make, hopefully, it could be a topic that more people want to see. You know what I mean? Or it could be feedback that could be like, oh, don't say as much, which I'll try my best not to. And I do try my best naturally, but sometimes just comes out because, as they say, to is to be human. You know what I mean? And again, that what I just said, you know what I mean? I say that a lot. It's an English thing, it's a part of the culture of the part of England that I live. It's what I think that you say to as a sort of explanative, yeah, explain. Basically, it's what you do to explain something. And whenever you say, you know what I mean, even if you don't know what I mean, you know what I mean. Yeah, it's like forget about it. Yeah, it's the English version of that in a way. But yeah, so any and all feedback is greatly appreciated. But yeah, so I've waffled on enough, I think. It's a hot day, and I'm very sporadic and wired, and I'm just really, really hot at the moment, and I'm excited. And that's really not a really good cause because it tends to make me very sort of wired, very sort of on the level of like Nicolas Cage. If I'm very tired, I'm very wired, and I want to go find some rockets. You know what I mean? So I don't want to go too crazy on you beans. So I am now going to finally shut up and I'm going to wrap things up and just honestly, I'm just going to end up and just say thank you. If you got this far, I really do appreciate it. Thank you. Rio will be the next one in the Blue Sky series. I don't know when it will come, but hopefully, if I've planned this out correctly, this should come out sometime in June, possibly at the beginning of June, depends. Um, and then I've got the Xbox showcase and other showcases to do after, so this might be the Rio one might come a bit later, probably maybe to the middle of June. Um, but yeah, it'll come during the summertime, and it makes sense. Rio and the birds, the macaques, and all that jazz. So it's a very summery sort of episode. So the end of winter, well, the winter's already ended, but the end of Ice Age and onto something a lot more sort of tropical and sunny and matches the weather. And I can put my Hawaiian shirt on and really get into the mood. So there's a lot to come. Thank you very much for sticking with me. Thank you for listening to this episode. Thank you for listening to the Nerdstalgic podcast. I've been your host, Luke the Human. Hope you're all well. Hope you have a fantastic day. And I will catch you in the next one. All right, Beans. Bye-bye.